All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're unpacking some of the big ideas from a really fantastic book, Morgan Housel's The Psychology of Money. And it all kicks off with this wild, true story that kind of flips everything we think we know about money completely on its head.
So here's the central puzzle. How in the world does a guy who spent his entire life as a janitor and a gas station attendant manage to leave behind an $8 million fortune? It sounds impossible, right? But this isn't a trick question. The answer is actually the key to understanding how wealth really works.
So to figure this out, the book sets up a perfect real-life comparison, a tale of two guys whose financial stories could not be more different.
In one corner, we've got Ronald Read, a humble guy from Vermont, a janitor. And in the other corner, Richard Fuscone, a top executive at Merrill Lynch with a fancy MBA from Harvard. I mean, come on. If you had to bet on who the financial success story was, it's not even a question, right?
But here's where reality just throws a massive curveball. Ronald Read, the janitor, died with over $8 million to his name. And Richard Fuscone, the Harvard MBA, he went bankrupt. His huge, lavish mansion was sold off in a foreclosure auction for pennies on the dollar. So, what on earth happened? How is that even possible?
Well, the answer is almost shockingly simple. Ronald Read just saved what he could and patiently invested it in good, solid companies. For decades, he just waited. Fuscone, on the other hand, was leveraged up to his eyeballs, borrowing tons of money to live this crazy lifestyle. And when the 2008 crisis hit, poof, it was all gone.
And that right there, that is the core idea of this whole book. When it comes to money, how smart you are doesn't matter nearly as much as how you behave. It's not a hard science. It's a soft skill.
Think about it like this. Physics has laws. Gravity works the same way every single time. Finance? Not so much. It's driven by people, by our fear, our greed, our overconfidence. It's messy and emotional and completely unpredictable, just like us.
So let's be really clear. Richard Fuscone, the executive, knew a million times more about finance theory than Ronald Read. But Read understood something more important, his own behavior. He had patience. Fuscone had greed. And in the long run, behavior is what won. It's all that mattered.
Okay, so if our behavior is so critical, we've got to ask, why do we all behave so differently with money? And the book has this fascinating take on it. It's because none of us are crazy. We just all see the world through this incredibly narrow little keyhole of our own experience.
This quote just nails it. The tiny, microscopic sliver of history that we've personally lived through feels like the whole truth to us. We think we're being rational, but really, we're just making massive assumptions based on a ridiculously small sample size.
Here's a perfect example. Let's say you were born in 1970. In your teens and 20s, you watched the stock market go up like a rocket ship, almost 10 times over. Your gut tells you, hey, stocks are awesome. But what if you were born in 1950? In your teens and 20s, stocks went absolutely nowhere. Your gut feeling about risk is going to be totally different.
And it's the same thing with something like inflation. If you were born in 1960, you lived through prices tripling. You remember that pain. But if you were born in 1990, inflation has been a total non-issue for pretty much your whole life. You just don't see it as a threat. Two people, same world, but completely different economic realities, all based on the dumb luck of your birth year.
But hold on, it's not just our personal experiences. There's another huge, invisible force pulling the strings on all of our financial lives, the twin forces of luck and risk.
Let's talk about Bill Gates. Total genius, right? Of course. But his story also starts with an absolutely insane stroke of luck. Back in 1968, he happened to go to one of the only high schools on planet Earth that had a computer.
Seriously, think about that. The odds of a teenager having that kind of access back then were literally 1 in a million. And Gates himself says that without that piece of luck, there would be no Microsoft. Plain and simple.
But here's the other side of that coin, and it's a gut punch. Gates had a best friend, Kent Evans, who was just as smart, just as obsessed with computers. They were going to conquer the world together. He was standing right there next to Gates facing the same incredible odds.
And Kent Evans also experienced a 1 in a million event. He was killed in a mountaineering accident before he even graduated. See, luck and risk are siblings. They are the exact same force, just pointing in opposite directions. For every Bill Gates, there's a Kent Evans out there, whose story we never get to hear.
So, yeah, acknowledging luck is huge. But let's get back to what we can actually control, our behavior. And maybe the most dangerous behavioral trap of all, especially for people who are already successful, is the feeling of never enough.
There's this incredible story about the author Joseph Heller. Someone pointed out that a hedge fund manager made more money in a single day than Heller's masterpiece, Catch-22, had made in its entire history. And Heller's reply? Yes, but I have something he will never have. Enough. Wow. That is just one of the wisest things you will ever hear about money.
And we see this destructive force all the time. Look at a guy like Rajat Gupta, worth $100 million, but he risked it all for insider trading just because he wanted to be a billionaire. Or Bernie Madoff, who had a perfectly legitimate, wildly profitable business, but it wasn't enough, so he built a catastrophic Ponzi scheme. They had everything, but they had no enough.
This is why the single hardest financial skill has nothing to do with numbers. It's getting the goalpost to stop moving. It's stepping off the treadmill of comparing yourself to others, which is a game you can literally never win. And it's knowing that there are some things, your reputation, your freedom, your family, your happiness, that are never worth risking for money you don't even need.
Okay, so let's tie all of this together. We started with this puzzle about a janitor and an executive. So what's the big takeaway from their story?
It really all boils down to 4 simple, powerful ideas. First, your behavior is your superpower. Patience will always beat a PhD in finance who's greedy. Second, know your own story. Understand that your view of money is powerful, but it's not the complete picture. Third, respect luck and risk. Just accept that some things are out of your hands. And finally, number 4, define your enough. That is the only way to find true financial peace.
Because in the end, this whole thing isn't really about Ronald Read or Richard Fiscone. It's about you. And the single most important financial question you'll ever answer has nothing to do with stocks or bonds. It's much simpler and much harder. What is your enough?